first inquire how much time is left on the clock at the vote? Pardon? 9 minutes. So normally here we would be able to head over that way with a couple minutes left. But I appreciate being recognized and appreciate the witnesses. I regret I had to step out of the room and miss the opportunity to introduce Mr. Boyer, who comes from, I'll call it my neighborhood in Iowa. And some things call us away, and we have simultaneous committee meetings and hearings going on in this town on a regular basis. I wanted to start with Mr. Mix and ask you, do you know if there's aside from these issues that you've testified, do you know if there is a foreign entity out there that has regulated your means of production, that it said you have to raise potatoes in a certain way?
I'm not aware of a foreign entity. There's protocols that we have to meet to ship to Mexico, you know, the brushing of dirt off, and we have to apply a storage product so they do not sprout. But as far as a foreign entity, I'm not aware of one.
Are there any regulations that you know of that would regulate how you raise potatoes that could not be identified at the border? For example, application of a treatment to the potato or the cleaning those potatoes, they can look at that potato and examine it and tell whether you've done what they've asked, correct?
Yes.
So there's no regulation that you know from a foreign entity that regulates the means of production, just the product itself.
Right. They don't. There's no means of regulating in how we grow the actual potato.
Okay, and I like that kind of world. But Mr. Schaefer, I'd ask you, do you know of any regulations of any means of production that you have to comply with that cannot be identified by examining the product?
No, I'd only refer to limited exports because of biotechnology issues some countries put on us that might, I consider that a production tool that I use, so that might be one of the means you refer to.
But that would be GMO?
Correct.
And don't we know also that can be examined in the lab to determine the GMO identity?
Correct.
Like Roundup Ready beans, for example?
Yes.
And so we know that technical fee has been applied to soybeans coming in from Argentina into Brazil over the years and charged back again. So I understand your answer and I appreciate it. I'd like to turn to Mr. Boyer and say, do you know of any regulations of the means of production that come from an outside entity, outside of Iowa or the country, that cannot be identified by observing the product and examining it, but only can be a regulation on your means or method of production?
At this time, I'm not aware of some, but I think if we're not cognizant about it, it will come to fruition. We see what's going on within our own country between states. California requiring some kind of identifying of a product if it was raised in a cage or not in a cage. I know for a fact you can't tell from a pound of bacon if that pig was castrated using euthanasia or using anesthetics, or if that sow was housed in a gestation crate or an open in an open pen. But at the same time, we're seeing through the European Union some of our processing practices. One of the problems that the European Union had was the color of the walls in the processing plants and also the style of molding used in the processing plants. Those have been addressed by some of the packers, but it's still one of those issues that they're using what they're saying are sanitary or phytosanitary measures, but they're accurately not being portrayed that way.
Aesthetics for hogs or aesthetics for the people that are processing them?
I couldn't answer that. I'm not from France or
You would take that, I think.
Yes.
But in any case, what you've identified, Mr. Boyer, is the trade protectionism by regulating the means or method of production. When that happens from a foreign country, we see that as trade protectionism. When that happens within the United States, state to state, it's still trade protectionism. The Constitution of the United States reserves the regulation of interstate commerce to the Congress and prohibits it to the states for that very reason, because they didn't want to set up trade wars between the states. Now we're seeing this emerge in the ag community with regulations of gestation crates, stalls for veal calves, how you feed ducks and geese for liver, the egg piece, and it'll be broilers next. And so I'm just suggesting that the language that we have written into the Farm Bill now that prohibits the states from regulating the means of production of ag products is an important piece of language and legislation that must go into law, or we will see in the United States trade wars by regulating the means of production that are worse than the trade competition that you have testified to here today. So I thank you, all of the witnesses, and I thank the Chairman for calling this hearing, and I yield back the balance of my time, even realizing it's a minus 14 seconds.